Welcome, my fellow freedom lovers. I'm Alex Jones, your host, and it's Friday, February 22nd, 2013, and this is yet another original edition of Infowars Nightly News. Tonight, we have got some amazing information. We're going to do kind of a weekend review, but also one of the big breaking news stories today that broke at Infowars.com and also DrudgeReport.com. But before we get to that, I just want to tell you that we have probably the biggest independent hip-hop rapper in the world, Immortal Technique, or Tech as he's known, traveling here right now. He should be here any minute to do an interview in the second segment here in studio with us tonight. And I met him about 8 years ago. I've spoken at a few of his events. He played at one of mine and performed at one of my premieres of Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, that we did with We Are Change in New York and Manhattan. That is coming up after the break with some other surprises as well. So again, thank you for joining us here this evening on your Friday night. We know you have a lot of choices out there, and thank you for being subscribers to PrisonPlanet.tv. Without you, none of this would have happened. And we're having a big effect, again, because of our doggedness and our focus and the great team out there, but also together, you out there supporting us. So I salute you. God bless you. Okay, let's get straight into the news. Well, you knew this was coming for a long time. The federal government moves to disarm veterans. And there's a Jakari Jackson report right there where he breaks all of this down. But an official letter, and I opened the phones up today, and we were sent a whole bunch of emails with different copies of these from New York, Connecticut, Texas. This particular one's out of Washington State. And it says that we're here to let you know you got to respond to this letter. No judge, no jury, no proof. You're being declared incompetent by the VA, and you got to turn all your firearms in. Now, here's a cautionary note. We are confirming, and there's news articles out on this, but callers have been alerting us. They're also, if you accept this and turn your guns in, no judge, no jury, they're also taking your kids. And they're even declaring the wives incompetent and saying, you must be mentally ill too. So it's a purge. Now, they said the Jews were mentally ill. They said the Jews were evil. The communists said anybody that wasn't a communist was evil. This is the dehumanization as they flip Homeland Security from Al-Qaeda, the globalist run, onto the American people. This is very, 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 very serious on so many fronts. And just like the globalists use immigrants to drive down wages and to balkanize, they also then use immigrants who don't have as many rights when they feel like it to abuse them and set the precedent to take everybody's rights, just like they've used black communities as the area to sell drugs and allow prostitution for 100 years, to then use that as a pretext to lock up the population. Now, this is a very sophisticated model of control, but look over here at Infowars.com. In the featured news area, I had that stamp made to point out what's really going on. Veterans Gun Confiscation Order, Department of Tyranny. As you can read the actual article, red linked up at Infowars.com, there in the featured news area. This is bombshell information. Let me read to you what it says on the top of page 2. A determination of incompetency will prohibit you from purchasing, possessing, receiving, or transporting a firearm or ammunition. If you knowingly violate any of the prohibitions, you may be fined, imprisoned, or both pursuant to the Brady handgun violence provision. We can actually show you there in our article. Yeah, it's a little bit above that. Yeah, just click on the red link right there. Federal government moves to disarm veterans. And we have all 3 pages posted, but yeah, right there in red. There it is. That's at the top of page 2, but we have it blown up right there. And there's 3 different types of letters going out. One says you've got to come in for an evaluation or we'll have you arrested, basically. That's why it says at the top of the notice, you must respond right now. So there's that type of notice. Important reply needed. Yeah, go ahead and scroll down page 1. You can show people. Important reply needed. And then it goes on to threaten you. And this is totally arbitrary and unconstitutional. It's like when the mayor's office of L.A., somebody put up a few Infowars signs a year ago, and they sent us a bill for $1,200 for 3 signs and say, we'll arrest you if you don't do this. Or we'll fine you, or we'll sue you, or we'll go after your credit. There's no judge, there's no jury, there's no citation. Somebody can go put up Obama signs everywhere and say, Obama did it, and then sue him or arrest him. But, of course, they wouldn't do that. It'd be selectively enforced. This is just where they go, you know what, come turn your guns in the local police department. Here's your letter. And we knew this was coming. Imagine, as a group, statistically, veterans are very low crime rate, very, good, upstanding citizens. You can look up the FBI uniform crime statistics on that. We've done many reports on it. And when we're told they're the pillar of society, but then, because a few veterans out of 10 million or so that are still alive do a few crazy things because, they've done crazy, they've done wild things. They don't have that fear of doing radical things. That's the system's view, that all veterans are bad now. And all gun owners committed what happened at Sandy Hook. And this is the same stereotype you hear. All Southerner whites are racist. All blacks are criminals. All Mexicans are illegal aliens. All women are whores. All Catholic priests are pedophiles. All police are corrupt. It's not true. You have to go off an individual and what they stand for. Not just the veterans are bad, the veterans are horrible. And I know you know this, but what about the system? We were the first to tell you, before it was even in Homeland Security documents we got, they were training to target veterans, because I'd been in urban warfare drills and seen them practicing taking out veterans. And now it's all confirmed. They know veterans, if America is attacked, have sworn an oath. And if there's an internal takeover, they know veterans are going to answer that call to defend this country. They know that. And so they're basically saying, like, anybody out at night is a criminal, or anybody that's a veteran is a criminal. And it's an incredible fraud and a stereotype. I can't tell you how many times when I had a dog, and I lived in an apartment in North Austin, the dog at about 11 o'clock at night would want to be let out to go to the local park and take a crap. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times in that apartment, there was no crime around there, that I would walk across the street over to the park, and I mean, the cops would come over, shine lights, get in my face, and I get it. Criminals could be out at night, but statistically, not much more in the day, really. It was just an excuse of, it's nighttime, we're going to, frisk you because you're walking your Labrador Retriever. You're an obvious terrorist in the middle of a park. And again, it's the same thing. All veterans must be criminal. It's like, oh, terrorists might try to blow up a plane once every 10 years. So everybody has no rights, is treated as a terrorist, and the TSA is going to grope you, but then also rob your bags. I mean, why wouldn't a terrorist just go try to become a TSA agent? Plus, then, the whole terror thing's fake on top of it. So a big story, our top story. We're going to do some weekend review here in a moment. But it's very important to get this article out to everybody. Federal government moves to disarm veterans. And this is a big deal. And it's up at Infowars.com. Now, if you're watching this, this is going out tonight on Friday night. But if you're not watching us live when the show goes out, by tomorrow, it'll be in the Featured News Archive, and that's the link under Featured News Archive. Or if you go to Infowars.com, it says Top Stories right next to Breaking News up there at the top. And you can click on the red link to get our news feed, our latest stories, but Top Stories is our stories, what we think is most important. That is a very key link, because so much of the great videos, articles, research we post scrolls off probably 3 pages a day you're missing. So that's key to be able to check all of that out. Okay, let's go ahead and move along to the next story that dovetails with all of this. Computer contractor apologizes for selling shooting targets of children. And you remember this report that came out. We can just do a document cam too, guys, if you want. And it showed a pregnant woman, a 5-year-old boy, an old man with a gun, a lady in her bathrobe. And at first, for about a day, people said, this isn't real. Jones has launched another hoax. That's probably just sock puppet psyops, little computer programs that put that out. And then weak-minded parrots pick it up. Snowballs. Snowball gets bigger as it goes downhill. Mockingbirds, they pick it up. So you got snowballs, you got mockingbirds, and you've got useful idiots. And then what else do you have? You got snowballs, mockingbirds, and parrots. Papagano. Parrots are cool, so maybe that's all right. You got snowballs. I already said you got parrots. You had mockingbirds. There you go. Two bird analogies there. But the company came out and said, yes, they're ours. And in defending themselves, they let it out. We were given a $2 million contract to print these. DHS requested these. DHS bought $2 million. Some of their targets are like $5 a piece. So I don't know. How many times is $5 calculated to $2 million? What is that, like 500,000? I'm just going 400,000. How many targets is that of, oh, they just bought 4 billion bullets. Having a Freudian slip. They just bought 2 billion bullets. It was, just teleprompter free, folks. It was 1.6 just a few months ago. 2 billion bullets, we're going to cover that in a moment, was 1.6 just a few months ago. And they're like, okay, Homeland Security requested this, and okay, we're not going to sell them anymore except to DHS. So DHS contractor apologizes for selling shooting targets of children, offensive cutouts depicting pregnant women, gun owners in residential settings removed from their website. But the problem is when we first called them and others called them, they were like, well, what's the big deal? This is the new threat. This is who we're going to be facing. Basically, gun owners during a collapse in their own homes who won't turn their guns in. This is what the feds, who aren't even supposed to be involved locally, except for like bank robbers and stuff, and kidnappers, of course, have to investigate themselves to actually find the kidnappers and stuff. That's who they're saying their new target is. They're building up for total war against the American people. So let's move on to the next story here. Why 1.6 bullets? Because government wants to save you money, of course. And our own David Knight did some math for me on this. Now Breitbart did the numbers. I was doing stuff a few months old. It's now 2 billion rounds plus of ammunition has been bought. That's enough to run a 24-year war in Iraq at 5.5 million bullets a month. But let's expand onto the AP article. Drum roll, document cam shot, please. Again, covered by Fox News. Why is the Department of Homeland Security buying so many bullets? And then showing people the chicken scratch here. 5 million bullets, 214 rounds per agent, 70,000. Most of those are clerical. Only about 20,000 actually do that, so it's more like 3 times that. So let's say 600 bullets per agent. But that'd be 214 total agency, all the clerical people and secretaries and janitors and the rest of it. So that's 214 rounds for every federal agent, quote, in a law enforcement agency. That's enough. That's let's say 15 million a year out of 2 billion rounds. That's 133 years of ammunition. And they're only buying more and more and more and more. So this is a giant arms buildup. And in review, we interviewed the sheriff on Monday. It made national news on Wednesday. Sheriff responds to attacks over Second American Revolution comments. They spun it to say, how dare you go on Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist? And he said to them that I didn't know I needed your approval. When did people stop being entitled to their opinion? And if anyone on to say it's Piers Morgan saying take our guns that's radical. And then he went on to say, it's not up to me when we have the revolution. It's up to the American people when to decide to push back, not me. See, that's the answer. When they play the moral authority like you're bad and they caught you, kicking the dog or something, or they caught you smoking cigarettes behind the barn, you're not a criminal. You're not a perp. You're the citizen. You're the sovereign. And it's like they call the sheriff up and go, oh, look at you going on the kook show. And he's like, who are you to tell me where to go? You're a control freak. You don't run the world. That's the way you answer these people. Not when Piers Morgan tries to dictate reality like he did to Sheriff Clark and myself. You go, look, you want to take our guns. Stop acting like you don't. Cut the crap. I'm offended by your deceptive mode. We're done. That's the way you counter these people. Very powerful article. Sheriff responds to attacks over Second Amendment and Second Revolution comments. You need to get this article and send it out to everybody you know. It's very, very important. Now, I want to go to 2 special reports here, one by David Ortiz dealing with some of the, quote, liberal operations that are going on that are really eugenics-based. We're going to go to that second. February marks Black History Month, and during the month, liberals will exalt their love of black community, but as David Ortiz reports, socialistic ideologies clearly lead to black genocide, and there's no doubt of that. That's coming up. But first, speaking of genocide, The New World Order wants to get everybody. There's a little piece done here by our own Melissa Melton, and I have the article right here. Death cafes. And there's an article about how cool it is because humans are bad, and humans are ugly, and humans are evil. You know, first the eugenicists say the blacks are evil and ugly. You know, the abortionist says, why do you want to save ugly black babies? And then it's the Mexican babies are ugly. And then it's the Chinese babies are ugly. And then it's everybody's ugly. Death, death, death. They really just don't want you to have a survival mechanism. They want you to hate yourself and believe you're a failure. So you just roll over and let the collectivists take your life over. So I tell all the people involved in death and how great death is and how fun it is. You know, you don't like having life cafes, and you're always the environmentalists that want to run our lives. Nothing's stopping you from committing suicide. I hope you join humanity, but if you're going to try to, you know, carry out all your sale of death and how sexy it is and all the rest of it, hey, nobody, I know you want to run things and organize, you know, all this, but nobody's stopping you from taking the exit out of here, okay? Nobody's stopping you. And all your spoiled nihilism and all the power and all the spoiledness where the establishment just lives in luxury and thinks of nothing. And so you're unhappy because it was Victor Hugo, the French philosopher, one of my favorite quotes, you know, I've quoted it probably 100 times or more, said prosperity makes monsters, adversity makes men. I flipped it. It's adversity makes men, prosperity makes monsters. And that's true. And so you're just these self-hating, self-loathing people that think death is so cool. Hey, death's easy. Death's real quick. It's a rotten body. Life, raising your kids, having a strong culture, doing what's right, making the right decisions, creating things. It's hard, but it's also exalting. And I feel sad that you're timid, boot-licking, anti-life people that so hate your chicken-necked, cowardly experiences that you flutter around like moths around the lamp of death. And they sell death everywhere. Let's kill babies up to age 3, the Journal of Pediatrics says. Let's kill people that come in having a heart attack. You know, if they're not big taxpayers, they're not worth it. Let's have death panels. And then it's an idea that a society's imploding instead of expanding. Instead of having a big economy to service everybody, you have one that shuts everything down. It's like McDonald's 50 years ago getting you to throw your own trash away, and now restaurants make you throw your own trash away. All that did was get rid of an entry-level job. All that did was decide we're not going to have people pump gas. We're not going to have a culture. Pretty soon, French restaurants, you won't get your food served to you. You know, you'll do it on a hot plate and go throw it away. They're training you to live like slaves and not to have culture like Gerald Celente talks about. It's so simple. Start having respect for yourself and realize service out there in companies, if everybody does it, they'll build it into the whole system. But we're dealing with a prison economy that got rid of our industry, told us we'd be a service economy, but have gotten rid of that as well. So this whole death culture and death is sexy and Jack Kevorkian sexy and, you know, all the rest of this crud, I'm sick of it. Here's Melissa Melton's report.
I'm Melissa Melton reporting for the Infowars Nightly News. Yesterday I was in the grocery store and I happened to come across a magazine in the checkout aisle simply called Tea. But that's not what got my attention. What got my attention was the word death on the cover. And I flipped through to find out there's a new movement called death cafes. The article says these death cafes are, quote, offering an opportunity for strangers and friends to gather for tea, cake, and an open discussion on what has become a very taboo subject in our Western culture, death and dying. The trend began in the UK, but it's now sweeping across the globe with death cafes popping up all over the United States. One of the owners that hosted Canada's first death cafe did it, quote, amid pine boughs, candles, and holiday lights with soft, dreamy music. The magazine goes on to quote him as saying there is a dreamy aspect to our North American highly westernized culture that somehow disowns death, and, quote, death is life's loving companion. It's all around us, and it's a good thing, a just and even beautiful thing at that. We as a society are continuously being bathed in a culture of death. Just take Time magazine's June 2012 issue with a cover that simply said, How to Die.
That's right. There's the cover for you right there. How to Die. Yeah, you still think there's no eugenics agenda out there in the dinosaur media and in the government? Still think that? Why is this on the newsstands? I was half expecting it to be sort of a recipe. How to die. Take more vaccine shots, drink more aspartame, take more pharmaceuticals. Instead, I found an article that talks about how we can save so much money in America by denying care to the elderly.
I saw a report that's up at Infowars.com. Mike Adams did on this issue of Time Magazine, How to Die. Well, you see the messages in sitcoms, dramas, everywhere. The young children are horrible. The older horrible. Everyone's horrible. But whoever the latest trendies are who are adopting whatever culture of death is being funneled out of the social engineers.
You may only realize it subconsciously, but our society is constantly being inundated with images of death. It's absolutely saturated with it. If you go to any store, you're going to find clothing with skulls on it for all ages, even infant clothes. And some people may argue this is to make pirates seem cool, but pirates still raped and killed people en masse and burned down people's villages. Why are we putting that on a baby? I mean, infants are brand new to this world. They're just coming into the world. They're just born. Why are we covering them in symbols of death? A simple search of popular big box stores like Target and Walmart show that even baby products have skulls all over them now. Products like pacifiers, shoes, and diaper bags. If you want to get together with a support group and talk about death, that's totally understandable. I mean, that's something that we all need to deal with. It is a part of life. But what random person do you know just gets up on a Tuesday and goes, you know, I think today I'll submerge myself in death. Let me go down to that death cafe and talk to a random stranger about death for a few hours. Why are we continuously being sold the idea that death is trendy and cool?
You know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers? That's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Is it because the global elite are on record obsessed with eugenics and talking about how the world is overpopulated and at least 80% of us need to die? Are they mass conditioning the Western world to trivialize our own demise? Maybe that's the question we should all share a cup of tea over. For Infowars Nightly News, I'm Melissa Melton.
And finally tonight, in our news rant teleprompter free section, brought to you by prisonplanet.tv and all of our great subscribers out there, we have one more report before going to break, and he's here. He's here. He's going to be in studio with us, and another special guest who will be laying out on the table. A beautiful lady. A beautiful lady. It's coming up right here on this table. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. This lady can give liberty. She is the teeth of liberty. She is the fear of tyrants in the hands of people. She will be laid out with all of her little children that she launches out into the universe with all of their explosive beauty. She will be supine on her back, on her front feet, sloping down to her belly and her hindquarter. That is coming up after the break. But first, David Ortiz is going to break down the genocide. We just covered the love of death. Well, we're covering the so-called liberals, the Harry Reids that say, well, he's a light-skinned black, so he's smart. Or Nancy Pelosi going, well, we got too many minorities. I mean, we got a lower population with Planned Parenthood. I'm liberal. Let's go ahead and go to the real Black History Month right now, part of Infowars Nightly News. And then right out of this piece, we're going to break and bringing you a mortal technique and his lovely assistant.
For Infowars Nightly News, I'm David Ortiz. Well, February marks Black History Month, and during this time, liberals, especially liberals in the African American community, are going to try to define what Dr. Martin Luther King really believed in, and they're going to insinuate that Dr. Martin Luther King was a Democrat and mostly supported socialistic policies. But I just want to make the African American community aware of what the Democratic Party really has done to your community. I'm not saying they haven't done some good, but in my estimation, they've done a whole lot more bad, yet the African American community seems to run into the arms of the Democratic Party. Over 95% of blacks vote Democrat. It's truly astounding. Let me just run over some facts for you. Some of them are going to be very obvious, but people dismiss them. And it's important that we reiterate these facts. One of the obvious facts is that President Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. President Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. He freed the slaves, yet you don't see inner cities naming streets after President Lincoln, naming schools after President Lincoln.
With the fate of human dignity in our hands, blood's been spilled to afford us this moment. Now Now, now!
Republican President Dwight Eisenhower was the first president in the 20th century to sponsor large-scale civil rights legislation. It wasn't Lyndon B. Johnson, the Democrat. The Ku Klux Klan started out as a far-left democratic organization. Quite often you'll hear ridiculous comments from many Democrats who say that the NRA is like the Ku Klux Klan, but they really should open up a book, because if they did, they would realize that the Ku Klux Klan was a far-left democratic organization. Far more Republicans proportionately voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats. You know, during this month, you're going to see pictures of Lyndon B. Johnson and Dr. King. It's important to note that far more Republicans proportionately voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats. Very few people acknowledge that President Lyndon B. Johnson said the most vulgar things to the black community. He's touted as a hero, but he said very vulgar things. Among them, this is a quote, "I'll have those ends voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And this.
You can say that they can't discriminate, but I've got to prove that it discriminates, and I can't prove it in Texas. They're old men and white folks."
And obviously the granddaddy of all issues, why I say sadly that the African-American community has to wake up out of its trance, is the issue of abortion. According to the CDC, over 600,000 black children are murdered annually because of abortion. The CDC also says an estimated 45% of all blacks that are conceived are aborted. Let's look at what, Touré Neblett says about abortion and how he's thankful that his first girlfriend aborted their child.
In a nation where 40% of children are born to unwed mothers, we are hurting our nation by making family planning harder. I thank God and country that when I fell into a bad situation, abortion was there to save me and keep me on a path toward building the strong family I have now.
And lastly, one of the many issues that the Democratic Party also supports that, in my opinion, has crippled the African-American community is the public education system. As a result of this public education system, which individuals like Al Sharpton over here and Professor Dyson say we need to support even more with more money, as a result of this system, 60% of children, an estimated 60% of all children, cannot read or do math proficiently. And in the city of Detroit, over 90% of students cannot do math proficiently at the 8th grade level. Yet it's been the Republican Party that supports school vouchers. They've been wildly popular in Washington, D.C., and the Democrats, it's not until this year that they really started supporting school voucher programs. As a result of these programs, graduation rates have increased by 20%, and most of the kids who are enrolled in this are African Americans, and studies show that over 90% of parents who have their kids enrolled in this voucher program are pleased with the results. It's important to note that the Republican Party's love of warfare has also led to the slaughter of millions of people. I want to leave you with an image of a sonogram of a child who's about 3 or 4 months old in the mother's womb. And I want you to ask yourself, as you see this image, would Dr. King support a party that enabled abortionists?
ProPure is introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. This is the Pro One by ProPure. You wanted it, you got it. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine. hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. This is a revolution against the tyrants. They love putting the toxic acid base of fluoride into your water. They love the fact that it's an adjuvant supercharging the trace Prozac in the water and the hormones and the other chemicals. By cutting out fluoride, you cut out the turbocharger in all the poison being artificially introduced into your body. This is what I use. It's a win-win. You get a high-quality product at the lowest price. You support the InfoWar. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro 1 filters today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139.
Infowars.com is proud to introduce the new Infowars skateboards by Alien Workshop. Skaters have always been against the grain socially. Now wake up your friends politically. Just go to InfoWarsStore.com. We have divide and conquer our brainwashing. Then take your deck to your local skate shop, pick out your own trucks, your own wheels, and then hit the streets and wake some people up. Here is legendary skateboarder Jake Nunn.
This one has a lot more concave than I have on my board, and I like concave. It makes it easier to turn and feel the board. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's almost the same shape as mine. It's not really a sport, and it's not really art. It's just kind of freedom, you know? I've listened to Alex Jones for a long time, and I love what Infowars does. I've always loved Alien Workshop, too. Like, I think it's kind of cool you guys got together. This one's pretty nice. Definitely one for the wall, one for the collection. Also good to skate.
Get these limited edition decks at InfoWarsStore.com.
This is Jake Nunn. Get these beautiful new skateboards at Infowars.com. Alien Workshop collaboration. Good stuff.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for the interview portion of tonight's InfoWars Nightly News. And our special guest in studio is the Barrett 50 cal BMG that I just shot about 70 rounds out of the other day. Absolutely amazing. We're going to be talking to the Barrett about how it's only been used in one crime since it was invented in the last 30 years against an armored truck. And how the establishment wants to ban things like Bushmasters and the 223. Well, they're also trying to ban you, Mrs. Barrett, who I do want to say are a very, very lovely lady. No. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, people got very excited yesterday when I said on the radio that Immortal Technique, one of, or if not the most successful independent rappers or hip-hop stars in the world, millions and millions of downloads, hundreds of thousands of CDs back when they still had that, was coming to town. But they couldn't make it yesterday, but they're here today in Austin, Texas, to talk about The Martyr, his new CD, very powerful music, and a new film he's got coming out with some pretty big, heavy hitters. And so coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll go to break. We'll play the trailer to the new DVD, and then we will come back with our guest. But he goes by Tech. Immortal Technique is here in studio with us with the beautiful Barrett 50 cal. And Immortal, are you getting a little bit excited right here? You got to admit, that is a beautiful piece of work right there, isn't it?
Somebody spent a lot of time creating this thing. Someone used their imagination very, very well, and I'm pretty sure they were overcompensating for something as well.
Well, yeah, overcompensating. You need an anti-tank weapon that's handheld.
Yeah. I think, you know, first of all, I appreciate the introduction. The DVD is actually in stores right now, ViperRecords.com. And I also want to say that, you know, it's interesting to be on this program because a lot of people will approach me and they'll be like, I can't believe you're going to do this show. And I think that there are a lot of perceptions about yourself that that people have the wrong idea about. And I'm more than willing to sit here and have a tempered, relaxed, calm discussion about some of these things because I think that, you know, you're not one of these guys who came out and said the whole fascism started with the black guy crowd. You know what I mean? I remember you from the Bush administration days being out there saying, do you realize what's happening here in America? You know, you are looking at it through a right-left paradigm is what you were saying to people, when in reality, it doesn't matter who's going to be there. Whoever comes after Bush is going to have to cross the T's and dot the I's.
Well, no, that's it. Cynthia McKinney was on my show about a month ago. She's back on next week, the former congresswoman, for those that I'm sure most viewers know who she is. And she said, look, it's not that Barack Obama's the lesser of two evils. He's the more effective. Mitt Romney would have done the exact same thing, but couldn't have gotten away with as much.
And I think that, look, if someone else had been able to be in that position, smiling, and then sending all of these troops and mercenaries back into Iraq, back into Afghanistan, exploiting the natural resources, deporting as many people as he did, which we'll get into later, I think that that would have garnered a lot more hatred if it had happened from a right-wing Republican white guy, as opposed to someone who has the impression of being an incredibly liberal individual and yet follows, you know, a secretive agenda that really doesn't answer to anybody, especially not.
Well, sure. We're going to get into globalism and a few things we talked about before you came into the studio here. All I can say is I'm a true independent. I tweeted earlier today and said, you know, 2 real independents. You're a real independent. You're not controlled. I mean, I think I first met you 7, 8 years ago in New York, and I've had a chance to be at a few of your events, and you've been there at a showing of Endgame. And I just respect the fact that I agree with about 85% of what you stand for, and I probably agree with the other 15 if I fully understood it or had time to follow it all. But most of what I've heard you talk about, I agree with. But you're through a different prism, a different perspective, a different scanner darkly, myself as well. My only issue is this. Whatever the globalists are really pushing, it may have a bunch of good reasons and a cover story associated with it of why it sounds good. But I look at what their internal documents, leaked documents, what the larger end game is.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, we can't have open borders because the globalists want a North American Union. They want to implode Mexico under Agenda 21, force everybody off their land into maquiladoras, then up here to drive down wages, then to create a culture clash. See, if the system was trying to unify things for everybody to be friends, it'd be different. In the name of, quote, liberalism, they then sell it as a... But, I mean, it would take an hour to break the whole thing down.
No, but we'll get into that. I think the reality is that people often misunderstand and misrepresent the mythology of America. For example, the creation of the United States in the fact that when Britain surrendered, it ceded a series of territories that didn't belong to them. When Mexico surrendered to the United States after the Mexican-American War, it ceded a series of territories that did not belong to them. You know, all of these Native American tribes, they weren't ruled solely by Spain. As a matter of fact, Spain couldn't exercise control over them. The Mexican government couldn't exercise control.
No, I agree.
Right? So how about those people?
But see, the UN will try to represent them and then take over.
Right, but this is...
But I mean, what do you do? Because now it's the UN taking over America.
And then the other part of it becomes from when I hear people talk about who deserves to be here and who doesn't. Because I've met people who don't have papers legally, right? And yet they serve their country in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, mind you, that's not a war that I necessarily believe in. But when I hear a bunch
but it's hypocrisy.
When I hear a bunch of chicken hawks saying, "Oh, you're not down with America," and I look at them and I say, "Hey, what did you ever do to be considered American besides fall out of some wretched hole in Kansas or New York or Texas?" You know, here's a guy who barely speaks the language, and yet he's putting his life on the line for the perceived safety of the United States. Now, regardless of whether you or I agree with the premise of the war,
he's paid dues
behind it, right? He's paid his dues.
No, I get that.
The people, if you're drinking orange juice out there, if you're wearing clothes that are made out of cotton as opposed to hemp because they had to outlaw that, if you're eating strawberries in the winter, blueberries in the winter, that doesn't grow in the winter. It had to come from plantation-like atmospheres. You know, we've overthrown governments overseas just to keep...
I agree. Globalism, neocolonialism.
Right. And it's tied into neoliberalism as well. The idea that everything's for sale, that the air's for sale, that the water's for sale. You know, these people want to privatize every aspect of human life. And I think that, you know, sometimes the difference is people can't hear me because I say it through hip-hop, and no matter what the venue is, they'll still think hip-hop, irresponsible, arrogant young people, or they'll hear you say something and they'll say, "Oh man, I love this guy, but he went crazy on Piers, and I don't think that he, you know, should represent the movement that way." At some point, you and I will only touch a fraction of the people that we need to speak to, and yet I think that what's important about it is to have so many diverse groups of individuals who have the same core message. What's behind the mask? You know what I mean? Don't show me what you have in the right hand when you play the old switch and grab. You know what I mean? This has a trajectory. At some point, we're going to get...
And that's what I'm saying. Whatever they're pushing, whatever the establishment wants, you can bet it's not good for the general public. I don't care what color you are. I mean, here's an example. I like the immigrants that I know from Mexico, and they tend to be better family people, not decadent, spoiled brat Americans. I don't care what color the spoiled brat American is. We've had it good so long, they're spoiled brats. And that's an over stereotype, but there's some reality to it. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But then the Mexican government, if I go down there, will shake me down, beat me up, steal my car. I can't move down there and go have a baby paid for at the hospital. I can't get all this stuff free. And then I'm criticized up here by Mexico for how bad I am when Mexico has their most draconian anti-immigrant laws in all of Latin America. I'm just sick of always hearing inherently that America's bad. What's bad is this imperial, global, corporate, British model that corporations have adopted that is now open source for these elites.
Right. I think, though, that what needs to happen in that conversation, because, you know, I love to read the criticisms of myself, not only because I find them funny and they're not true, but also because it gives me a chance to debunk these things.
Me too, it's entertaining.
When people say to me, oh, Alex Jones, you mean the guy who talks like the Micro Machine Man and puts all these dates and stuff into it? I say, listen, if you slow down what he's saying and you look literally one sentence by one sentence, you have 200 things to research within the span of that. And I think that sometimes what would benefit you is to slow it down and say, hey, man, you know what? Today we're just going to deal with this.
No, I agree, but here's the problem. The way my brain works, I think most people's actually work this way, is that
I love when people start like that. The problem is the way my brain works.
Well, there's like 100 different... in fact, what people think I'm talking fast, that's like 1/100th.
Right.
Because when I see something, I know all the connections and how it integrates, because I've read all the establishment publications, and then I know the three or... See, they're thinking like in three-level chess. The general public's playing checkers. Right. And they want to keep us in a checkers level, and that's what's so frustrating, is that I can see their end game. But listen, we talked for about 5 minutes, you know, right when you got here, about some of the things we want to talk about, and we're kind of hitting the end of it.
Sure.
At the start, but it's going awesome. In the limited time we've got with you, because I know you've got a show to do, let's start with, I said, what do you want to cover first? You said guns. So I said, hey, grab the 50 cal out of the safe. So that's why the 50 cal is here on the table, because on your shirt is the AK-47, a mortal technique since 1492. I get it. We, the indigenous peoples, are seizing, you know, our right to self-determination and to be armed.
Let's just touch on that. I always tell people when they come to me, they say, oh, you know, revolution, you have a lot of revolutionary figures from Latin America that are from the left wing. I explain to people, our revolution doesn't come with socialism or communism. That's an adverse effect of America's pressure. Originally, we heard the great prognosticator of democracy come down to Latin America at a time when we had a series of horrible imperialist military dictatorships that governments now are trying to resemble, you know, where, you know, if you were convicted of raping a woman as a military officer, you could get out of it by agreeing to marry her. The most insane type of laws you could possibly imagine that governed a government. But when we look at that, when people were saying you can have a democracy and you can vote for your own leaders, we thought that's wonderful. What a great idea. And then the great proselytizer of democracy, we realized, was the same one backing up Stroessner, Batista, you know, the imperialist governments that existed in Latin America. And the country and the people of Latin America said, what else do you have on the table? Who else has something besides
this? And the Soviets came.
And the Soviets and the Chinese came. And I explained to people, yes, that's a natural part of our society, but what we have to explain to individuals is we didn't need a European man to come from the 19th century and explain to us dark people in Latin America the complex concept of
Plus, anybody from Europe or the U.S., no matter what color they are, if they've got globalist backing, they're coming with the corporate jackals. They're coming with the economic hitmen. And so that's the issue. But then you find out that the mega banks, this isn't a conspiracy, this is on record, funded the communist movement knowing Europe was revolting against the robber barons and the royalty. So they created a new fake grassroots movement that they could control. So it's the same thing with the Soviets going in there. Absolutely. It's like running from Bush to Obama and then running from Obama to Mitt Romney, they're all part of the same thing. So what do you say for America and Latin America and the world? What is at your core, a moral tech, what is at the core of your belief, studying this so long, being an articulate, smart guy who's been around the world? From your historical research, then, what system do you like? Because, look, you've got Peter Thiel, the big Bilderberg guy, trying to take over the libertarian movement right now and turning it into a fake privatization tyranny. How do you beat something that metastasizes and, like the Thing, turns into whatever you run to? Like you run to one system and it's real at first, but when you turn around, the Thing grabs it, absorbs it, and then, you know, you turn around and it looks like what you thought it was, but it isn't.
Someone once told me that Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of these religions expanded specifically because they fell into the hands of lesser men. If they had been run by the original people who conceptualized the ideology and who for some reason had it close to their heart and veins, you know, do you think Jesus Christ would look at the way that people have commercialized his religion? Do you think Yeshua ben Yosef would be able to look at it without shedding a tear and saying, you've missed the basic premise of everything that I'm trying to tell you, which is treat other people the way you want to be treated? You know, if I came back, I would be a Mexican born in a manger. You know what I mean? In a hoopty, you know, on occupied territory that was stolen during a war that people started purposefully because they knew they could goad an idiot like Santa Anna into attacking, and then reach around with different forces, pull the entire Navy up to Veracruz and then Los Angeles. What would he say about that? He would be born into a society that he had no technical human rights in, similar to the way the Hebrews were treated in Rome. Now, when you discuss all of these issues that are going on in the world, I think what people don't do is they don't connect the actual history to it. And I think that's where I try to implement that to them, or implement those ideas when I say, hey, listen, if you look at the history of Russia and the quote-unquote USSR bringing freedom, did they bring freedom to Eastern Europe?
No, they brought mass murder and death.
You have to understand, they did the same thing to Eastern Europe that America did to Central America and to the Caribbean.
They colonized it.
Colonized it, took it over, and said, you know what, we're going to make you dependent on us, to the point that they can still shut off the gas in the Ukraine 5 years ago. Oh, do you got a problem? There you go. What's your problem now? Oh, you have an issue with me and something I'm saying? Cool. You know, I'm going to put polonium in a pellet, and I'm going to put it into your body, and you're going to die of cancer a week later. Don't toy with me. Don't play with me. You know, they give specific examples of people, and the CIA was complicit in the killing of an archbishop of the Catholic Church, Romero, in El Salvador. And yet, even though he was made a saint, there's no gigantic backlash against the government and against them being there in present-day times, because they've forgotten that history. And I think when you remind them of that and you show them this is the blueprint, in the same way that you point out historical facts from a timeline for people, you know, when you speak to them in plain language and you say, hey, listen, this is real. This actually happened. This is not a fraud. You know, this is not a conspiracy. When people talk to me about 9/11 and they say, hey, you know, how can you not believe the government story? And I always say, listen, I am not sitting here saying that I know exactly what happened. But you know what? I will say this much. I cannot believe the government because they couldn't tell the truth about the air to breathe to people. That's the simplest thing in the world.
That's it. If they've been caught lying over and over and over again and caught doing false flags, you've got to question it. But breaking that down, sure, you've had colonial powers, and the British had the most successful model, so it's been adopted by the corporations. And I mean,
reinforced with religion, reinforced with neoliberalism now, reinforced.
Sure, well, that's their cover. Right. I mean, it's like giving Obama a Peace Prize. But what I'm saying is, now they put out that Dinesh D'Souza film, and I interviewed him, and he's saying Obama is anti-colonialist. That's why he's doing all this stuff, and it's the opposite. Obama has a CIA cover as an anti-colonialist, but clearly his job is to bring in global corporate colonialism that's so powerful now. The banks are above the law. They issue the money, and they're going to dissolve the countries and even the old empires into one global empire. And then what's its ideology? You know, other empires were domination, total control, but most empires, unless it was Hitler and what he tried to establish, the Neo-Germanic Empire, did not want to exterminate everybody. That had been done some with the natives in some of the areas, but this is a eugenics-based exterminism, which isn't fair to say ultra-Hitlerian, because Hitler got his ideas from these people. So how do you talk to the left, the right, the people that are into native rights, people that are UN stuff, when all of it's a projection of a global corporate takeover?
Because they have these ideas based on mainstream media about who we're fighting against. You know, for example, if you tell the average American we're not at war with radical Islam, they think you're crazy. They say, oh, no, we're not at war with communism. They think you're insane until you say, hey, wait a minute. We're not at war with radical Islam, because who's our biggest ally in the region? Saudi Arabia. Their brand of Wahhabism is like the Taliban with money, and they have the influence to interfere in Syria. They have their.
I was going to say
they have their little.
How does the left put up with it?
Yeah. All right, then. What about communism? When they say, oh, we're not against communism. Oh, how could you say that? Who's our biggest economic partner?
China.
China. So you know who we're really at war with, and I tell people all the time? We're at war with people that say no to us, no to the agenda of the people who run behind government.
It's a mafia.
That's technically how it is. I mean, if we don't give access to natural resources as a third world entity, we find ourselves on a hit list. You know, you find yourself being persecuted, being brought down.
If you try to be sovereign.
It doesn't matter if you're a communist government, or it doesn't matter if you are a capitalist entity that just wants a little more of the slice. They'll portray you, one, as a Stalinist, or two, they'll portray you as a kleptocracy, when in reality, who were you stealing money for? You. We just didn't want to cut you in anymore because you felt like, as America, you weren't doing enough to get your slice. The same way people were ignorant about France and Iraq when they said, oh, the French are soft, we're going to eat freedom fries. I'm like, the French are war masters. They've been involved in every major battle in the world since they had it out with Attila the Hun. I mean, I think...
And then once we took it over, they got that oil.
Well, the only thing was this. When Sykes-Picot, which, you know, you're an intelligent man, but for people that don't know out there, Sykes-Picot was a treaty that was signed before World War I, where they decided to carve up the Middle East. France's slice was Lebanon and Syria. England's slice was Iraq and Egypt and all the rest of that. When it came down to it, the French were like, dude, that's not my problem. America, you inherited that issue.
No, that's right. And now who's behind Libya? Who's behind Syria? Their slice, it was France, because it's next door to Tunisia. You're absolutely right. And see, you've done your research.
The UN as their little, like the UN is all of a sudden there to save them from Gaddafi, as if he wasn't used by them for their purposes before.
But see, that's what's so refreshing, is that you've actually done research when even 95% of people that think they're research don't know all this. That is what is so frustrating, is that they put Obama in. Webster Tarpley predicted all this in the Obama deception 4.5 years ago. He said they're going to attack Africa. They're going to put in AFRICON. He named all the countries. They're going to take out Gaddafi. Because
say that again for the people. Who was that guy?
Webster Tarpley.
Webster Tarpley. You see, that's what I mean. That's how hip-hop is. Slow the record down, bring it back. Webster Tarpley. Go look that up, ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there.
Exactly. But, I mean, he laid it all out. We knew it was going to happen. And it's so diabolical that they're carrying extermination operations all over Africa. They've been for 25 months attacking Syria, killing the Muslim minorities, killing the Christians, blowing up mosques, churches. And then you read the New York Times, it'll say, more car bombs. They call for Assad to leave, and never even in the article say Western-backed rebels did it. It implies Assad did it. I mean, how does the so-called left get behind putting al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria run by Saudi Arabia?
Well, the same way that they don't go into outrage when they find out that an entity like HSBC was caught out there laundering money for splinter cells of al-Qaeda. In other words, people that are out there dedicated to killing Americans, whether or not it's a fake op or not, people really are
Wells Fargo laundering the drug money.
Troops are dying out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can talk to American families at home that don't have their mom or dad or uncle or brother coming home. People are dying, and HSBC, who some of you are going to, who unfortunately I still have a small amount of money in, which I'm going to pull out when I get home. After I read these articles, I look at this and I say to myself, these people did this, and they got a $2 billion fine, which for them, and it's the equivalent of you and me taking a penny out of our pocket and throwing it on the table.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing when they caught 3 years ago, over 2 years before. This is 5 years ago, but in 2 years, $378 billion. Guys, pull up $378 billion drug money laundered by Wachovia, Wells Fargo, and they got a $111 million fine. We did the math. What's $111 million out of $378 billion? I mean, it's something like if I robbed a bank and had $1 million, the cops came and I gave them $3,000. And so the issue is they have created al-Qaeda to control the real Arab fervor who's been wronged so they can control the opposition. And then the low-level al-Qaeda doesn't even know they're globalists, but the high-level guys are CIA, MI6, Mossad, Pakistani intelligence, and that's how they control the whole thing and have the pretext to invade.
Without making it as complicated as that, for the people that are at home watching, it's the old premise of them telling you, you know what, we're locking up the little drug dealers to get the big guy. No, you're not. You want to get the big guy so that he can rat out all the little guys and all of them can go to jail because they justify this system for him. The big drug dealer, he's not going to go to jail. He's the one with the $2 million lawyer. You're the fool on the ground, the zealot, the pack flipper, the crack seller whose lifestyle is glorified in music, and yet you're not getting the benefits of this gigantic, you know, chemical drug industry.
Look at the opium production.
Right. Who's getting that paper?
10% of world production in 2001 was in Afghanistan. Now it's 93.
It's insane.
And when they get caught, they have the troops growing it and go, yeah, we grow it. Hide the elephant in the room, move on. But specifically, Second Amendment, tell me where you stand on that.
You're never going to ban guns in this country. You know what I mean? I mean, you can read the Dick Act of 1902. I mean, we're talking about it being against the Constitution for them to do that. Did people misuse this as a tool? Yes. You know, did someone try to blow themselves up on a plane? Yes. Whether it was a shoe bomber or a guy with a grenade strapped to his underwear, we all have to go through screening now because of that. And do I agree with people being screened and having to take like to have some sort of mental capacity to own a weapon like this? Yes, absolutely. However, I always tell people that before we get into an alarmist position, if the government wants to attack you, for example, people in New York, I tell them, they don't have to take away your guns. They can just turn the water off. Can the average person in New York drink out of the Hudson? Can they drink out of the East River? No. They control every other resource about your life.
And that's why they want you so dependent. Guns are kind of the vestigial sign of one of the last freedoms we've got, and I could go through the issues of...
No. Also, my, not to interrupt you, my big shout out to my friend Dave Gomez, Chief Warrant Officer. We had this conversation, and I said, you know, what good would, you know, light arms like an AR-15 be against a division of heavily armored troops that came in? Like, in other words, what good would your pea shooters be? And he said to me, it's working really well for those people in Afghanistan. They don't have advanced weaponry. It's the willingness to die. It's the
willingness to resist.
Look how frightened they were of a guy like Chris Dorner. One man, regardless of whether you or I think that story is true or the public does, one man, he wasn't armed with bazookas and tanks.
The police were so scared they shot up multiple innocent people, were hyperventilating in fear, and then said, we're going to burn it down, burned it down,
right,
and then told us you didn't hear that.
And anyone that would dare to question whether the government was corrupt or not, or whether his position was right, is automatically painted as if they support murder, right? The reality is this: when you kill someone without due process, that's murder. The cops basically went in there and murdered him. Did he murder people? Absolutely. Was he wrong for that? Yes. Did they want him alive? No. Because if they got him alive and he stood trial, I think it would have been the end of it. I think that people would have been like, are you kidding me? Is this guy about to blow the lid on how fascist this system has become, on how people have been trained to think this way? And I know we always talk about Nazi Germany, but the Germans were not animals, Alex. They were human beings. They were conditioned. You know, when you read the stories of the SS officers that were given a puppy, you know what I mean, to have during their time in the academy.
Then they had to kill it.
And the last order is shoot the puppy in the head. unflinching, absolute loyalty, unquestioning to what they think is the republic, to what they think is what is supposed to be the
And it was done by increments, just like we become so evil by increment. A little bit more, right. Rationalize, give into it, and pretty soon...
Which is why I was happy to hear you clarify that stance on immigration, because I always tell people, if they're going to come at people, who do you think they're going to test it on? People that you already think are, if your position...
Yeah, but I went with Jesse Ventura, where they've got the immigrants illegally locked up, and I've called for that not to happen.
Right, but no, but I'm just saying, I'm glad you clarified that.
But you have to, it's two-way street. They're going to use the immigrants in their liberation theology control system as another weapon. You understand the globalists play all sides.
But liberation, even liberation theology, if you want to talk about it, is the idea that it's an idea that was taken from a real
I know.
Way,
That's what I just said. The thing,
and then turned
the
over.
thing.
Right.
No, I understand that.
Whatever you run to, they take it over. It's like, but I think that's the nature of a corporation. When people talk to me about Illuminati and they say, "Oh, Illuminati's so scary," I said, you don't have to use hypotheticals. You want to talk about people behind closed doors who make decisions about your life and what they're going to sell you that may be killing you. That's Walmart. That's Honeywell next door. These people that are here that will say, we're going to make these decisions. You have no power over it. We can hide behind the fact that we're a person and a corporation, even though we technically can't go to prison.
Yeah, it's McDonald's down the street.
It's Burger King horse meat. You know what I mean?
And horse meat's nothing. They've got us so worried about horse meat. And then meanwhile, they've got bromine in the Gatorade, baby parts in the Pepsi. Right. And that's the thing about Bayer. It came out about a decade ago that for 11 years, they knowingly put HIV and hepatitis in millions of ampules of factor VIII, killing hundreds of thousands of hemophiliacs. And it came out in the trials, because France was one of the ones that had trials about it. It was a worldwide corporation. They actually said, well, these are infirm people, get rid of them anyways. It wasn't just we're cold-blooded and going to sell people something that kills them, we don't care. It's more than that. It's more than that. Right. But I think they get off on it.
The people who run this society, they present themselves as moral leaders. They present themselves as if, you know what, in my family, we would never do what these ordinary plebeians are doing out in the street, when in fact they're the most perverse out of anybody.
Well, no, that's the psyop. That's why I have to wear this to get people to even pay more attention, but this is a uniform. And then you wear this uniform and you look like the uniform, then people actually listen to you, but that's the whole deal. The men that dress like this don't do anything wrong. The truth is, the guys that dress like this are doing almost all the bad stuff.
Right, and I always tell people, when you see somebody selling their body for money in the street, it's obvious. They're showcasing themselves. The prostitution is a visible aspect. When someone sells their soul for money, how obvious is that? Because it happens every single day as much as people who sell their body.
And that's why...
And they do more harm to American citizens. And they do more harm to human beings than anybody else.
And that's why they want to make everybody poor, is so we'll sell out to them.
Right.
They don't want us being independent. Amazing information. I wanted to get... behind the scenes, though, you said they'll never get rid of the guns. You said that on air. But, bottom line, you also talked about drones. My point is, this gun's been used in one crime to rob an armored car. Right. Not this gun, but one back in the 80s. The Barrett 50 cal, okay?
Why would you need a Barrett in case you send drones to my house?
Yeah, that was the point you made. I wanted you to repeat. But it's larger than that.
Right.
It's a real symbol of freedom. And you make the joke about overcompensating for something. This was so two-man teams, one to spot, as you know, we're saying off air, and then one to deal with light armor. This is a anti-armor weapon. We were shooting through quarter-inch pieces of steel 2 days ago.
Take down a plane with this gun.
But you could also, do all sorts of things just with a can of gasoline. The issue is, it isn't about the can of gasoline or the truck or the gun. It is about the mindset, and more of these guns out there makes it a freer society.
Can I offer something? I understand your point, and that's a perfectly debatable issue. I know people that would disagree or agree with that as well. But I can offer another rationale. Instead of blaming guns, right, for all the violence in America like people are trying to do now, instead of blaming video games like they're trying to do in Congress, or violent movies, right, how about the fact that this country, this republic,
was born in blood,
has only had 20 years of peace? since its inception. Now, I would like to be able to blame this or blame something else, but I think that that's a very nearsighted solution. Just to look at it, yes, this...
No, we have a history of piracy.
This does kill people. Yes, absolutely. But so did Greek fire. So did a whole lot of other things that people invented and used. So did diseases that were given to indigenous people purposefully. One of the first examples of genetic warfare against indigenous people by Europeans.
That's in the British manual.
And I think, thank you for pointing that out, because this is the point that I'm trying to make. We won't have that critical discussion about how violent our government is and how violent our society is. Blaming it on this is the easiest way out. It prevents you from looking inward and saying, what have I become complicit to in America?
Well, let me say this, because what you say is absolutely on target, but here's the paradox. The United States was the giant, one of the last true freebooting, pirating, piratical, absolute, all bets are off craziness, where you had all the different native tribes trying to get this tribe to fight with that tribe, and the French and the Spanish and the British and the militias, and really it was a free-for-all. And if you really look at it, a lot of the groups using the same tactics. But the issue is that it was in that age, it was in that time, and if you look at that, there was a lot of murder and death, but it produced incredible wealth. Look at Europe, though. Even more people actually killed by governments and killed by the church and killed by other things, but it was the stagnation. So I'm not saying any of the evil in our history is a good thing or writing it off. I'm saying the quieter evil has gone on in China and in Japan, where if a samurai wanted to test out a sword, he would just chop up a few of his servants, and that was seen as okay. And I'm not attacking the Japanese either. My point is that the history has been skewed and twisted, not to demonize America, not to defend America, but to really not show people what really went on. And I don't even know what the point is, other than that because there's other empires, why did 5% of the world population end up getting half the wealth? Now that's all ending. And I think it was because there was that absolute out-of-control behavior going on where the central powers weren't in control. It allowed more creativity and people to do what they wanted, separating that from all the killing and violence. Right.
I think one thing that people need to realize is empires don't fall apart because they lose wars. We haven't won a war since World War II. You know, we didn't win in Vietnam. I know Korean War veterans that schooled me to the game, and even though I'm not a huge fan of war, I always thank people for their service, because at least they had the courage to go, excuse my language, rather than the people who got 1,200 deferments and have no problem sending young...
Sure, you can respect the individual for what they went through.
But I think the point is that, empires begin to die when people no longer believe in them. I mean, the partial collapse of the Soviet Union was due to the massive amount of cynicism that existed, because the government was no longer believable outside of Moscow. In other words, the people that were living in this Siddhartha-like enclosement were like, oh yeah, this is, the free Soviet...
Like Ceausescu.
Right. And then everybody outside was like, are you kidding me? You don't even have on paper what is going on here. Do you realize what's happening in Poland? Do you realize what's happening in Eastern Europe and Romania and all these other places? Do you have any clue? I mean, would you even be able to last for a day there without losing your mind? And I think that that's where we're at right now. The level of cynicism in this country has gotten to the point where people are saying, is there hope left for the Republic? Can we save it? Is it worth saving? And how did we start with this? You know what I mean? And I think the only way we can is, the only way you can stop being an alcoholic, Alex, is to admit you have a problem with alcohol.
I agree.
The only way you can stop being a drug addict is to admit you have a problem with drugs. America needs to confront its mythology, and in the mythology of its inception, the mythology of what it was used for. And I think what hurts Second Amendment proponents are when they deny certain aspects of what the Second Amendment was used for. Was it used to police slaves? Absolutely. Because no one becomes a slave quietly. Do you think the Romans enslaved the Greeks quietly?
No. They used arms.
They had a man called...
But again, you can't blame the weapon. You have to blame the culture and the time.
And that's where people have that escape.
But let me go one further with the whole... Let me go further, though, with the whole weapon thing. Did you know, because I kind of got into naval history, and it's the actual charts, you had indentured servitude, and you had the sharecroppers that were basically slaves as well, and you had the slaves all over Europe that didn't get freed in Germany, in some cases till the 1860s. You know, there were slaves in Germany.
Absolutely.
You know, the Hessians they brought over here to fight us?
Yes, absolutely. The Hessians, they brought 17,000 because the Duke of Hesse had a treaty with the king, and they said, oh, bring them down. Those are the first German settlements in New York.
Exactly, but that was a great brainwashing tool because these were slaves that owed blood debt to be a soldier,
right?
But they were so into it, they were happy to go die. Right. But they kind of said, hey, this looks pretty good, I want to stay here, and ran off. But
when they lost, it was funny because they said 9,000 single German men were like, dude, I do not want to go back to Germany. I love it out here. You know what I mean? I can live with indigenous people, beautiful women. I'm treated like a person. I'm not treated like some part of feudal history. And I think what people don't tend to understand is that Europe has plenty of indigenous societies as well. If you look at the Celts, if you look at the Picts, if you look at, for example, the history between Ireland and England.
No, it's all the same story.
They're trying.
Same thing that happened here.
They're trying to.
That's why the West was so good at it, was they'd already done it to themselves. But that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't bring up other forms of slavery to take away from the African slave trade and the stuff that went on with the natives and the sugar canes, because that was some of the most oppressive because the science had gotten better. My issue is it's used as a way to make people feel bad and have an inferiority complex that their ancestors were slaves. I try to bring up all the other slavery and the impressment onto ships and stuff of poor whites. That was slavery. And listen, did you know that on average, from like 1600 to 1800, on average, about a third of the people would die on each mission to the African slave coast? It wasn't just the Gold Coast blacks, half of them dying on the ship. It was the sailors. That's why you had so many pirates. That was the first ships where it was all black, white, Latin, all that on one ship. That's why they say pirates were the first libertarians. Is that if you really study history, they were all running off because 2 missions, you were dead. My point is people don't get how hard the world was. If you smarted off to somebody, they'd say, we're going to the street with a gun or a knife. I mean, it was, what I'm saying is, it was so hard is what I'm ranting about.
I think what people mistake is that in America, the crux of Western civilization, even the medieval monarchies, are based off of Rome, right?
They are, yeah.
And when people look at Rome, they tend to think, oh, wow, it's just like America with these shining buildings and establishments. You forget the organized barbarity of it all.
And it was based on slaves in 50 countries.
This is a society of complete imperialism where one man was considered God. You know what I mean? And his rule was absolute. The emperor, dictated something, and it happened regardless of what the people wanted. The Senate was there for show during the end of antiquity and the beginning of the Roman Empire, and I think that that's what people don't seem to understand. We live in a society now where the idea of checks and balances is practically for show, and it works on a local level. But once we get to a mainstream government,
I agree.
It's entirely built on...
Freedom is ceremonial.
Right.
And that veneer's wearing out. We've got to go to break now. I heard, because they told me, blame it on them, hey, he's got this film coming out. I didn't know it was already out. I saw the trailer before we went on air tonight. Tell us about this work. Tell us about where people can get it. Also, the new album. We're going to play the trailer for the film, and then we're going to come back. We're almost out of time. Do about 10, 15 more minutes with tech, Immortal Technique. Give out the website when we come back. People can find out where your shows are. I mean, I got to say this. I have interviewed quite a few hip-hop people, and I'm not kissing your ass. I think it's true. You are undoubtedly the most informed person of anybody I've talked to by light years.
Thank you, bro.
KRS-One, very informed, super smart guy. I'd say number 2 there. And I'm not saying, oh, wow, within hip-hop, boy, you're really smart. I mean, you've, are up there with, the brain bug, Webster Tarpley. That's his nickname.
Well, at least you didn't say he speaks so well.
Oh, you talking about Obama?
The Harry Reid thing, right?
We were talking about how, because that's what you want to talk about. In fact, when we come back, liberals and the condescension and what they're doing. No, my point is that I wish in hip-hop, that there was more of this.
There are a lot of people who think the way I think, Alex. It's just not conducive to the entertainment business for them.
I'm going to write a note here. Yeah. I'm going to tell secrets of entertainment. I've been told by 2 different people that were high up at MTV that ties into what you just said when we come back. But tell folks about the new DVD, the new film.
New movie directed by my friend Carrie Stewart. The Revolution of Immortal Technique talks about basically being an independent, coming up and learning the business and realizing that, listen, I can be successful at all this, but unless I'm willing to personally sacrifice for the message that I want to put out, and I want to put art before selling out for money, you know, what are the pros and the cons of that? And all the people have advised me.
How long has this been out?
It's been about a year, and it was 6 years in the making. It was
to show my ignorance. I follow some of what you do, but I guess I missed it.
No, it was a sleeper. You know what I mean? It was a great film. You got Cornel West, you know, one of the only black intellectuals that I think has really taken the Obama administration to task. And he famously told the MSNBC hosts that you've sold your soul for White House access.
I want him on.
I mean, you know, Cornel West needs to be on the show. He's someone who's willing to tell the president, you know, when are you going to come from behind some of the proxies and have an honest discussion about what's going on in your own hometown of Chicago?
Hey, did you bring copies so I can watch this tonight?
Yeah, we should have one. We'll send one.
Oh, but I saw the trailer earlier. Well, let's play the trailer for folks right now. Tell them the website where people can get it.
ViperRecords.com, or hit me up at Immortal Tech on Twitter.
Okay, let's go to that trailer right now.
You symbolize the voice of truth all around the world in the name of rap music and hip-hop.
If I was somewhere else simply because of the music I made, then there was nowhere it couldn't take me.
Can I have a platform where I can still be me, tell my truth, and make some money so I can take care of my life? There's a reason a nigga picks his pen up.
Immortal Technique is one of the most dangerous artists in America.
We moved to Harlem in the 80s. I used to get into fights all the time. I didn't realize what the prison industrial complex was. When I began to learn and understand things about the world, I was set free.
Whenever you got awake and took this journey, fuck, man, I'm glad you did it.
I'm nobody's puppet. I control me.
Repeat after me. Viva la revolución! Viva la revolución! Viva la revolución!
The revolution of Immortal Technique. Wow. And when he talks about, you know, up with the revolution, it's not a communist revolution. It's not a socialist revolution. It's not a fascist, right-wing, left-wing revolution. It is, I guess, a revolution of awakening and to be independent. I haven't seen the film yet, but I intend to. Bummed out that it's been out for a while and haven't seen it. Plus, I'm a free market guy. I probably want to carry it and sell it at the Infowars shop.com. That's how we finance ourselves here, with viewers like you that support us and your subscriptions to InfoWarsNews.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. And don't forget, I print the magazine, 100,000 each month, at cost in groups of 10 up to 100. And the February issue is almost sold out, and that's good because February is almost over. And it gets into the attack on the Second Amendment and why the tyrants want your guns and the whole socio-economic breakdown on Agenda 21. It looks like a Immortal Technique shirt, but it's the right to keep my arms shall not be infringed. Come and take it. Poster inside. Get those at InfoWarsStore.com. Pro Pure water filters discounted. All of it. It is so incredibly important for us to do that. And at the end of the broadcast here in a moment, we'll also show you up on screen the website for Immortal Technique. Now, Tech, we got to move quick. I'm going to try to ask my questions and shut up because I agree with so much of what you're saying, and it's exciting, you know, to have these ideas bubbling back and forth. But I want to run through as much of the other points because we covered 4 or 5. There's like 8 more left here that we talked about before tonight's show because this is stuff you brought up mainly, but you raised the point about how people sell their souls and how in hip-hop and rap and rock and roll, why is it all such a destructive anti-family, anti-body, anti-God, anti-liberty message? Why did MTV for 3 years push Marilyn Manson when nobody wanted to hear it? It was because it was a message the system wanted heard to control the message, because if you are awake and focused and centered, you'll see the tyranny and resist against it. But let me tell you the story I was told by a former executive inside MTV and a huge rock and roll star. I'll just say that. It's not Dave Mustaine. It's not some of the other guys that have been on. So I'll just leave it. I mean, it's huge. Household name. They were there in the mid-90s when the decision was made that this hip-hop and rap's getting really popular. Rap wasn't called hip-hop then. And we want it to be gangster and destructive
I saw that memo going around, yeah.
Oh, you saw the memo?
Yeah, they have a memo that's on the internet right now, not to interrupt you, where that is actually sent out. And they don't have the person's name attached to it. They don't have anything. But there's a memo that floats around the industry that discusses that. I tell people, listen, entertainment can be used for several different things. This is entertainment, yet you're using entertainment to inform people. You can use entertainment to pacify people, to placate them, to fool them, to keep them so focused on this that they don't understand you're taking this. For example, what would the United States be without the World Series, without the Super Bowl, without the NBA Finals? Those Roman Colosseums.
And it's empty.
Those Roman, and I'm not saying, I love basketball. I love football. How could you be, I mean, everybody that I've met here from Texas loves football. By the way, New York Giants, greatest football team of all time. But the point that I'm trying to make is, I love these sports, but at the same time, the way that they're controlled and the way that they're put out there is exactly
That's not our real culture. So what is our culture? So let me go back, because I want you to speak on this. But just to finish, you say, oh, there's a memo. Okay, well, I can confirm with a high-level former MTV guy who's successful now doing other things and a major rock star that they were told this was going to go on and what was going to happen in these meetings. So what I'm saying is that just backs up what you were saying. And then that ties into, a lot of the Republicans are racist or tribal or are using it at least. But with Democrats, from my real research, they were the party of the Klan. They were the party of the South. They were they couldn't win. And so Margaret Sanger and the Rockefellers, and I've got their memos, those are public, those are in the Library of Congress, they said, we're going to pose as liberals, we're going to hire the black leaders, we're going to kill these weeds. I don't think black people are weeds. Not because I'm some bleeding heart person. I don't want any people being treated like slaves, because I know we're all humans and it all comes back on us. So I've said that. Your take on the Nancy Pelosi's, the Harry Reids, the neoliberals, because from my research, they know they're not liberals. These people are hard. You want the real racist? You want because Republicans will just use it for control. You want the real racist? Look at how they use both sides.
I think that what people don't realize is that when you use code language to talk about people, you know what I mean? And when you play the holier-than-thou card and I'm a good Christian soul, the pathos, the ethos of the argument doesn't equal up, which is why Republicans look like hypocrites. The problem is that people don't examine the actual the actual end result of some of the policies of Democrats at that specific time. You know what I mean? I think, for example, Obama gets a huge pass. Like I wanted to ask him this. I really hope when he gets out of office, I say to him, you know what? I saw you on TV shed tears for children from Sandy Hook.
Totally fake.
Without even that, without injecting that material into the conversation, I want to ask him, how many tears have you ever shed for the children of Pakistan, for the children of Yemen, for the children of Gaza, whose drones and planes sponsored by America fly over and kill them? Have you shed one tear for them? You know what I mean? Have you said one prayer in your private, quiet time? Because if you have, I've never heard it. And maybe you don't think it's popular enough to do, but it's necessary. Two, I think that when you talk about a liberal bias or when you talk about any of these aspects of society, you can frame it in whatever way you want to, right? But if you are still controlled by the people economically, it doesn't matter what you claim to be. In other words, if I say I'm a martial artist, Alex, and yet some guy comes in and lays me out with one punch, I don't know a simple block, I'm not a martial artist. If I claim, oh yeah, you know, I'm a doctor, you are eating something, you start choking, I can't even perform the Heimlich. I'm not a doctor, I'm a fraud. Most of these people that are out there that permeate this sort of idea that they're some bleeding heart, I don't see them on the front lines of this stuff. I don't see them willing to get their hands dirty. They're like Pontius Pilate. This isn't my problem. You know, in the same way that we look at it and we say, oh, America came to the rescue of Jewish people in World War II. No, you didn't. You sent the St. Louis back. That's what you did. You know what I mean? Don't sit here and recreate a lie.
Our elite funded Hitler.
We have a guy that we have commemorated called Christopher Columbus, right? And I always tell Catholics and Italians, you can find somebody better from the Catholic Church, even though, in my mind, the institution itself is corrupt. You can find somebody like a bishop,
Mother Teresa,
anybody who's a better example. Italians, you can find a mother who sells pizza in Brooklyn right now, who's a better example of an Italian-American than Christopher Columbus, who never even touched America and who was prostituting 8- and 9-year-old girls. 8- and 9-year-old indigenous women. That should break the heart of every parent who's watching this program right now. You know, if we don't confront that.
But see, it's the dehumanization. It's just like Obama decided to flip the switch and cry for the Sandy Hook because it was an agenda. But they will never personalize the kids killed by drones or the 1 million+ Iraqis, because it all is a big cold-blooded show, and it's all about how they're punching our buttons, and then they're basically dehumanizing the whole of humanity. You're absolutely right.
Let me ask you something. I know that you are a supporter of Israel to a certain degree. Or at least someone's told me that. I don't know if that's true. What do you think about the way that Palestinians are disenfranchised of their human rights? We're not with the Newt Gingrich crowd here, that they're an invented people. Because when he said that, I was like, what are Americans? You know what I mean? A collective of European people that didn't want to be ruled.
No, I mean, clearly the people that got kicked out of that area of Israel or Palestine are Palestinians, the people that lived in Palestine.
Yes.
So it's like
I think there's sometimes.
Well, listen. That's all a misrepresentation.
Right.
Just like at the start of the interview, they take like a 15-year-old clip,
right,
out of context, where I said, now from the perspective though, the UN is against Israel. They're playing both sides. So then, from that perspective, and you watch, people will cut this out.
Right.
I said I support the state of Israel's right to exist. And then I went on to say, but I don't support what they're doing.
Right.
Now, that was like 14, 15 years ago. But I guess I'm like 1998, so 14, 15 years ago.
Because I always thought to myself...
But had you seen that clip?
No. Someone had played it for me, played an excerpt of it, which is why I wanted to ask.
Yeah, see, people like to play audio. But
that's the point. I wanted to
actually like the video because I'm about 60 pounds lighter. No, but let's go back here for just a minute.
Sure.
Where I stand is talking about Israel helping create fake Al-Qaeda, Israel manipulating our internal politics, Israel attacking the USS Liberty. I've made films about it. I've criticized it. But there's a cult of people that then make everything about Israel, right, and only about Israel. And so they edit things and change things. And, you know, they've got me saying kill black people online, but I didn't say that. Right. So a lot of that is, notice you were shown audio, right? Right. Not, no, he was edited.
No, but that's why I'm here to talk to you.
But so what they do is they, listen, I've gone, hey, not everybody that does the El Diablo is worshiping the devil. Right. In Italy, this is to ward off evil.
Right.
Well, they take that still and say, Alex said he worshipped Satan with a mortal technique. But see, I'm telling you, it's major deception. Just like people say about you, you're a communist.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that communism and socialism are a natural part of human development, whether you choose. No,
I know, but I'm saying is there's a massive amount of disinformation out there, and no matter how many times I say I don't support a lot of what Israel's doing, they spin that and say that means unconditional support for Israel. That's not what's happening.
Right.
I'm not. No, I know it's a colonial operation. The point is, and I've said that in the news, no one ever quotes that. They take a 14-year-old thing out of context and twist it. So I say let them have it.
Right.
You know, they say I'm a Jewish agent, I'm Jewish. Not true, but hey, okay. They say I'm a reptoid. You know, they say...
Mazel tov.
Yeah, exactly. So my whole deal is you bet I am. They also say I'm KGB. You bet I am.
Okay.
No, actually, I'm a guy who loves liberty and justice, who's really trying to figure it all out.
Well, but when people have always tried to pull the Marxist card with me, I've said, you know what, the difference is between you and me is I've actually read that book because I had to study it to understand how much control people wanted over a society. And when I was done with that, I said to myself, wow, it reminds me, and you mentioned it before, the great KRS-One who said, there's no such thing as a government. It's just people who rule over other people. And they design these little fancy systems so it looks like they're bringing freedom or they're bringing order. And America, the sad part is we are so cynical right now that I know people who are lovers of democracy that say, I'd rather see a king that could get something done and balance a budget than a president that can't do anything.
The system makes it worse and worse.
And that's where they want us to be.
Here's the key. I'm going to look right in the camera and say this right here. Here's the key to all of this, just what he just said. The system is running this. We don't blame it all on them, but 90% of it is the way things are ordered. Humans are unlimitedly productive and incredible. History's shown that. And the system is doing almost all of this. And then it says, oh, look at what happened. Give me more power. And then it gets worse and worse. That's the key.
Right. And I think that gets lost in the right versus left paradigm, because there are still very, very rich people from the left wing, supposedly, that don't want to have anything to do with urban society. They say to themselves, oh, you know, the upper crust of America, the 1%, have abandoned the public education
system. There's nobody more.
Abandoned the public education system. Yeah. They don't send their kids to public school. I'm sorry. And also, we can expand on that and say, hey, do you think Obama would be president if he hadn't gone to Harvard? No, he had no real, and please pardon me if someone wants to debate it, I totally can out there. He didn't have a gigantic amount of accolades to run on. I specifically remember them using in the media the fact that he was the editor of the Harvard Law Review as a selling point for his ability to run the government. And I always said to myself, where do you meet the future movers and shakers of society? In private school. However, if you, as a rich liberal individual, step back and say, well, I don't need to fund, you know, public school because that's not my problem, then don't complain when some poor, uneducated individual who didn't have a chance, who had every single aspect of his freedom infringed upon by police, who couldn't get a regular job, had a felony at 18, and is now robbing and stealing, blows your kid's head off just to steal his car that he doesn't know has a low jack in it or is worth half of what it was when it rolled off the lot. If you're not part of this society, then how are you even going to sit there and pass judgment or claim that you want to help it or claim that you're even part of America? You're either part of this or you're not. The massive amount of corporations that make money off this country want their business exported from here, and yet they want to sell to people from here. They don't want to pay their fair share of what it costs to run this country, what it costs for the military to back up those areas where they're taking natural resources out of, but they want all the benefits of it. In other words, they want to have sex with America, but they don't want to marry her. They're whoring her out. And I have no respect for those type of people, whether they come from the left, whether they come from the right. And unfortunately, I tell people, what you're going to have to deal with now, Alex, is a whole lot of frauds coming into the libertarian movement. Frauds.
Oh, no.
Unabashed.
Look at how Glenn Beck has now announced he's the leader of libertarians.
He's the leader.
While trying to demonize them.
That guy doesn't have both paddles in the water. And I don't know where he gets off thinking he's some kind of intellectual, moral, superior force to anybody else. You know, he's a guy who got thrown off of Fox. And that's like a daytime talk show. And that's low. You know, I think at some point, without having the credentials to make these statements, I think it gets lost in the woodwork.
Well, my issue with Glenn Beck.
Let me just say this, because I know a lot of people that really are community activists. You know what I mean? That really are people who work within the community. And they're not the ones that sit on their high horse talking down to people. They're the ones that get their hands dirty and work with the people. They're not the ones with the anxiety disorder who hang behind 20 bodyguards and won't be seen in public. They're the people that are actually on the street. And I have nothing but respect for those people. And it doesn't matter what...
Well, I was about to say, I happen to know the inside scoop on Glenn Beck. He's obsessed with my show. And no. And he's like an empty suit who takes acting lessons all day. And you're right, 20 bodyguards, totally scared, 5 bodyguards at his house. And I'm not, you know, I don't want to die, but I don't have any bodyguards. I'm not, you know.
Well, I mean, you got...
Oh, yeah.
This is worth like 20 bodyguards, you know?
Well, I mean, actually, for tactical up close, I got a Reaper 308. Anyways, the issue is I got a couple of guns. And hey, I bought that gun for guess how much? 5 G's. Guess how much it's worth now?
$25,000?
Yeah, about 15 to 20.
Yeah, I seen him selling online.
Yeah, and you know, the good news is I bought a couple more before that. So, I mean, my issue is, I don't want to get into guns. It's kind of obnoxious, but I got a couple. I'll leave it that way. And they're distributed all over the nation, and they're all mine. And they've made more, and they've gone up more than gold, which I also own a bit of. And, you know.
But let me ask you something then. What about the gun industry, the gun lobby? You know what I mean? When you got a guy like Wayne LaPierre. Like, don't you think that he does more harm to the cause by not even acknowledging the deaths of people and just...
He knows that they're going to... I mean, I'm not saying the NRA is perfect. It's this kind of establishment. It's actually been anti-gun in the past. If you look, it was set up with Northern soldiers, mainly Irish immigrants, never had shot. And so you could have like one Southerner kill 10 Northerners. So they started the National Rifle Association going, if we ever have another war, people need to know how to shoot. You know, scary as hell going against folks who know how to shoot, who'd grown up doing it. So that's what it started as. Then they supported the 68 Gun Control Act. We basically took over the NRA, the Libertarian Constitutionalist. We took it over. And so now it's walking the walk because it.
Well, the complaints I hear about it from people is that they say they only want specific people to have guns. In other words, they want prominent white Christian Americans to have guns, but when they're in the hands of people like the Black Panthers, other people who have self-determination.
When have they criticized that?
No, I'm just saying that these are the criticisms that I.
But that's made up. In fact, I've had Buzz Bissinger say I should be killed and stuff on CNN, and they go, Alex Jones is for guns because he wants black people to kill themselves, and the Klan is pro-gun, so blacks kill themselves. And the truth is, the Klan's the ones that got the first gun laws passed at the end of the Civil War, so blacks couldn't have guns. So I mean, I'm not disagreeing with your point. I'm getting directly at the point that I hear this about the NRA. It's like they want blacks to kill themselves with guns, but they don't want blacks to have guns. And that's actually not what I'm...
But I think it's not so much what you're saying. I'm not criticizing what your stance is. I'm saying that they seem disingenuous about it because they don't speak to the community. I don't think they have... It's like, what are these people? They're so brave and so strong, and yet they won't send a car full of 3 people into a black community to say, hey, you know what? These are your rights concerning gun laws. The next time you're thrown in prison by police that think you don't know your rights and think you're an easy vic for them to make money and keep you in prison, this is what you can do to keep yourself out. That's why they seem disingenuous.
Oh, I agree with you.
Because they don't go to a black
well, here's the deal. Most of these people...
And they keep them...
Sure. Wayne LaPierre, I've actually been in an event he was speaking at. The guy was shaking for him up to speak. I mean, here's the deal. You've got totally disconnected, predominantly white, but there's also, I've been at these things, it's everybody's there. They all like the same. I don't care if they're Hispanic, black, white. They're all totally focused, totally fake, and totally, because they understand it's all a business meeting. And everybody's playing it as safe as they can at these events. And yes, the establishment types like that are so cloistered, so separated, so compartmentalized, where they go to the country club, they go to church, they do this, that they don't even know what planet they're on. So with the NRA, they just know that if they play along with Obama and go, yes, we're very sad, that'll be spun against them.
Right. You know what? For me, someone once told me that it's better to talk to someone than about them. You know what I mean?
I agree. So well, listen, you've seen me in New York.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I
go out on the street.
I would totally be willing to have a conversation with people, and please contact for people from the NRA to discuss what sort of advice or what legal precedent are you setting up so that people who are victims of home invasion, victims of robbery, victims of every crime imaginable, you know what I mean? I don't want to turn everything into the shootout at the OK Corral, but at the same time, I see an entire generation of my people being incarcerated, being victimized, simply because they don't understand their rights under the law.
Well, see, that's why I love Ron Paul. You know, the NRA should be a civil rights organization. It shouldn't just be in fact, I've said that. It should not just be defending the Second Amendment because they all interconnect. That's why I love Ron Paul. He'll give a speech about the CIA bringing in the drugs to destroy the communities. Look, you want to fix the communities. Now they've destroyed everybody so bad, as Ron Paul said, you got to keep welfare going because you got to wean people off over 20 years. We're already so screwed. But you've got to quit shipping the drugs in. You've got to decriminalize, and Mexico will get a lot better overnight.
But this is
the United States.
And this is the other thing that I said. You know what? If people, and I always tell you, teach more with love than you do with hatred. You know what I mean? If I can go to those rappers who rhyme about weed and I can tell them, hey, man, do you realize that your fan base is being criminalized and thrown in jail, that they're having their rights?
No, they train them to put on a uniform that the police have been trained to attack.
But let me just finish my point. If those are your fans, why aren't you educating them about the rights that they have in terms of marijuana? Why aren't you educating about the way that they can legally protect themselves from this? The conversation in America shouldn't be, you know what, are we going to legalize guns or not? No, you're never going to get rid of them. The
rappers should be organizing people saying, get involved. Here's how you protect yourself. Get a medical deal.
On the weed side of it, too, you know what? At some point, the conversation stopped, and it should definitely stop being about whether we're going to legalize or not. The conversation needs to be now, are we going to legalize or decriminalize? What's better for the populace? What's better for people's rights? What's better per individual state? What's better to create?
Well, once you bring money into it, that's the surest way to. They call it legalization, but if you legalize but regulate, but have it at the state level, it will absolutely shut it down. And be a huge tax base.
And the saddest thing I hear is when people hit up my Twitter or the Facebook and they say, hey, Technique, you know, how can you be for marijuana legalization? What if someone got into a car while they were high and drove? And I'm like, dude, alcohol's legal. What if somebody got drunk?
Well, marijuana makes you actually drive safer, probably.
What if someone got drunk and got into a car? And
somebody smoking pot's driving 45 in the slow lane over there scared. Anyways.
They're stopping every 5 miles for drive-through.
Yeah. Anyways, it's all crap. Listen, there's going to be bad stuff happening in the world. Anybody that tries to sell you on, let's do this, let's take liberties. I heard a guy on the radio this morning going, let's have licenses to be able to buy alcohol. And, you know, a license to be a drinker as an adult. The nanny state isn't going to save us. It's all about cartels. Look, Prohibition was over after 9 years, as you know, a year early. The very same entities went and lobbied then to get drugs illegal that you could buy at the corner drugstore. There was much less heroin, cocaine use when you could buy it at the local drugstore. Laudanum, you name it. They made it illegal. They made it cool. Now the dealers had the nice cars. Everybody thought it was fun. They got into it. And it's a total fraud, absolutely. To young people out there, never use illegal drugs. Don't go on the prescription psychotropics. The least of our problems is marijuana. Decriminalize marijuana, not because it's good. I think overall it's destructive to a lot of people.
I disagree.
But, well, okay, fine. Now, I think there are a lot of potheads sitting around eating pizza all day. But the point is that...
Jesus.
No, I know, but some people. The point is that it's much more destructive to make it illegal so the system has an excuse to throw people on the slammer and put them into the criminal culture. Look, here's my issue about marijuana. I know there's a lot of this high-end marijuana that actually makes you think and has medical uses. The general public smoking a bunch of cruddy crap that makes you feel like you've been run over by a truck. And so, see, that's an elitist thing. I mean, people that can, like Joe Rogan, my friend, I mean, if Joe Rogan's around, I've said this a few times, he goes like, hey, try this. For 5 hours, I feel like I could do equations or something. But that's super high-end marijuana, different than the stuff that makes you feel like you've drank 3 bottles of Jack Daniels.
No, I definitely think that's correct. And more than just that, there's an old saying by a rap group I grew up listening to, Nice and Smooth, and in hip-hop, they said, too much of anything makes you an addict. You know, it's really about moderation in some sense of the word. And I think that's what people don't realize in terms of where public education has failed people. You have a class about calculus that people have to take. You know, most people
don't want to do that.
It's not just that, or a chemical class where a Bunsen burner, unless you work as a chem major in college.
You don't need it.
Or you're building your own meth lab. How the fuck are you going to need to use something like that? You know, but where are the classes on parenting that you're all going to have to do at some point? Why don't high schools have classes on parenting? Why don't they have classes to teach people how to interact with the police so that they don't become the victim?
Because they won't. Listen, did you see in Arizona?
I'm not saying, no, we're not talking about why. I'm just saying, that's.
No, but did you see in Arizona?
Yeah.
Did you see in Arizona where they have, guys, look it up, we can pull it up, the biggest prison company out there, it's just changed its name. They now are the security at the schools, and they literally are training the kids on how they're going to be prisoners when they get out of school. And now they have these agreements where 90% occupancy has to be agreed on in the private prisons. It's official, like Tulia, Texas, where they locked up the entire black population in the prison because the local boss hog owned it. So that's why that is. The schools are becoming prisons. This is a prison planet. I mean, my whole deal is don't underestimate how incredibly predatory the globalists are. I mean, they want to suck your energy out of you while killing you, and soon they're going to have all the robots, and not just drones, but factory robots. The elite all says in their publications, like Bill Joy's famous article, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, that they're going to kill us. And see, that isn't something to scare people. That's why all the race stuff and all the fighting and all the crap doesn't matter. In the final equation, I don't care if you're some rich white yuppie or some poor inner city white person or whatever it is, you are having chemical and bioweapons put in the air, the food, and the water. They're testing on you, just getting ready for their big move because they already have the life extension technologies. And the motive is, immortal technique, is they don't want you to have that. Like the guy says, I will destroy your seed forever and last the Mohicans. The globalists, all ancient groups are into that. They want all of our seed destroyed. We're not going to be part of the future. The ultimate Roman takeover was to kill the whole population and salt the earth. The globalists are salting the earth with GMO while building their underground seed vaults. It's Moonraker. Right. Ian Fleming, MI6, wrote that. Moonraker's real.
And when people say to me, they say, oh, you know, are you drinking that left-wing Kool-Aid? I always say to them, it tastes just as good as the right-wing Monsanto's milk. Because no matter which one you want and which one you're willing to absorb, I think you have to get past this paradigm. And I think that's where programs like this and what I do, you know, we don't have to agree about every single thing, but what we do agree about is that we don't want people to believe everything that we say. We want people to question everything.
Full spectrum analysis.
Yes.
But then they can also go into the extreme where without proof, people just make up, well, this guy's this or this guy's that. In closing, the whole bin Laden raid, Zero Dark 30s, torture porn. I'm going to do a review next week. I finally saw it.
Torture porn. Wow.
The Martyr. Tell us about the music after you get into your take on bin Laden and all the rest of it.
The Martyr is a 100% free album. And when I say free, you can go to Viper Records right now, and you can get it. It features all of my peoples from Rebel Arms. Big shout out to them. Poison Pen, Diabolic, G.I. Joe, The Circle, Hassan Salam, CF. Who am I leaving out?
Point is, it's up there at the Viper Records site.
Everybody in that Southpaw, big shout out to him. Basically, everybody that I came up with, Swave Seva, all the people that I have worked with over these years have been a part of this. We gave it for free, and when I say free, you don't have to fill out a survey. No 20-second Vivo commercial. You press one button. It's an absolutely free album. And the beauty of it was that I wanted to show people you don't have to die for revolution, Alex. That's not the point.
Got to stop believing in the system.
You have to live for revolution. That's what they're afraid of.
I like that.
They're afraid of that.
You don't have to die for revolution. You got to live for it.
You have to live for it.
Change your life.
It's easier for someone to sit there and say, you know, I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory tomorrow, and I'm really going to make them pay, as opposed to say, you know what? I'm going to go through the painstaking suffering of raising a boy and two little girls in this damn near fascist society in order to raise them to look at the world differently and to see
it's a long haul. Beautifully said. Let me ask you this, the immortal technique, that sounds like evergreen or an idea that transcends time. Tell me what immortal technique means and how I came up with that name.
Well, originally, you know, when I was incarcerated, my name was just Technique. That's just what I went by. And I always remember there was a Native American trustee named Judge. He brought me a pen and a paper while I was in the hole. And I wrote a song on the first record I had called The Prophecy. And I thought to myself, you know, in order for me to get my message across, it's going to have to span years of time. You know what I mean? What's going on right now, as you've pointed out, as I've pointed out through history, has happened before. People have taken this away. People have taken that away. People have manipulated the system. People have used a proxy to get what they want done. People have put a smiling face off on things that really have the fangs of a vampire. At some point, we have to analyze this throughout history. And also, I'm a man who believes in God, and I believe that, you know, a man that walks with God can walk anywhere. So I don't fear death. I don't fear people trying to marginalize my point and my perspective, because I challenge them to meet me on the field of intellectual battle anytime, anywhere. Just give me, you know, a few days' notice so, you know, I can buy your mother a suit. That's all.
Oh, man. Well, listen, you got to promise me that whenever you come through Texas, you'll come into the studio. And you got to promise every couple of months you'll come on via video Skype.
I'll try my best, man. Thank you very much for having me on.
You bet. It's been amazing. The bin Laden raid. You didn't answer that.
Bin Laden. do you know what? They would have never wanted that man alive. They never wanted him to testify on all of his dealings as a CIA operative. I think when people look at that in the past, I posted something on my my Instagram on Tech Immortal, an old news clipping where he was being hailed as a hero, where they were talking about him
in the 80s.
He was some kind of savior, and I always remember
CIA Commando Bin Laden leads Afghan Mujahideen to victory against the Russians.
They were talking about the great things that he was doing.
The Russians are pulling out. Bin Laden, what a kick-ass leader.
Right. I always tell people, regardless of what you think about the story, regardless of what you think about what it was, that little dumping him in the water afterwards is a tiny, infinitesimal, microscopic part of a much larger story involving war, pimping for natural resources. You know, I went to Afghanistan, and you know, it's in the documentary. We used the proceeds from an album I had called The Third World with a human rights organization called OMEID International, OMEID.org. Look them up. To build an orphanage and a school. And when people come up to me and they say, well, what do you think was the most effective thing that you did there? And I said, I showed them that Americans are not what they perceive them to be. You know what I mean? That most of them, when they look at us, are a bunch of people who have come to invade their country. And I didn't come there with the military. I didn't come there with the government. I came there not to bring people freedom, but to find it.
You go to Afghanistan in this film?
Yeah. And
you better give me a copy, right?
No, we'll get you one, definitely.
All right. Well, listen, that is just amazing. I'll just tell you, the whole Bin Laden thing's completely fake. I mean, I've done the research. And Zero Dark 30, all of a complete crap. Hey, what did you think?
Zero Dark 30. You know, that is torture porn movie, yes.
Hey, you saw it.
I saw excerpts of it.
It's amazing.
I didn't get to see the whole
thing.
It's
amazingly horrible. It's supposed to make torture and stuff sexy and then act like they don't like it, but they do. It's total yuppie power trip crap. In closing, what'd you think when you came to the Infowars studio? You've only walked right in on the show. I need to show you the rest before you leave here at the end of the show tonight. But, I mean, what'd you think to expect when you visited the Texas Pumpkinhead's house?
No, I never expect anything. That's why I'm never disappointed.
No, but so what do you think?
There's a saying in Spanish, el diablo sabe más por ser viejo que sabe por ser diablo. It means the devil knows more because he's old than he does because he's the devil. So I didn't come in here with any preconceived notions. People were saying, oh, you know, Alex is going to talk this way and talk that way. And I said, no, me and Alex are going to have a calm, peaceful, rational, non-yelling, fact-driven discussion. And that's the way it's going to go down, because the bottom line is that the people who created the problems that our society is facing are not going to fix them.
Well, yeah, you can say what you want about me and you.
Only the people watching right now.
But I have goodwill.
They're going to fix it.
I have goodwill. I want you to have a great life, your kids to have a great life. I want them to experience and learn things. I want my children and their progeny go forward into the future with everyone else. And this thing of screw everybody around you is just going to create a bad future for my progeny and your progeny. And it's that simple. I don't want to shit on each other anymore.
Right.
And it doesn't mean any of us have all the answers. It doesn't mean, but the point is we've got to have a good heart, but also be cynical and not buy into all the crap.
Right.
Immortal Technique.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very powerful.
Infowars, Free Palestine, all the immigrants. Can't demonize us all. This is a nation of immigrants. Read between the lines. Infowars, Immortal Technique, Alex Jones.
All right, hang out for just a minute. I'm going to end the show. I'm going to give you a quick tour.
Harlem.
All right, hold on right there. Folks, we are out of time. That was over an hour interview. Wow. I've met Tech, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago in New York, hung out with him a few times, been at a few concerts he did, spoke at some of them, been on some demonstrations in New York, took over. What's the big one? The President's March down, the famous We Took Broadway, or what is it? I don't know. Somebody was saying that whenever we shut down the highway. The point is that this is the best interview ever, and I hope you go back, like he said, because it's true. I don't just make this stuff up. I may be wrong about a few things, but when I'm just spitting out data, it's not just crap. Take it, take the words, take what he said, so much was said as well by Tech, and look at it, and take this hour-plus interview. How long have we been going, Marcos? It's over an hour right now on Infowars Nightly News, Extended Edition. And get this out, because we have to get out of these controlled camps and really have a real college of ideas and debates. So that is it for this Friday edition of Infowars Nightly News. I'll be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central, with the syndicated radio show. Free podcast audio links at Infowars.com. Video streams at prisonplanet.tv and back next Monday for the radio show and the nightly news. And again, remember, if you're watching this transmission, you are the resistance. And like our guest said, you don't have to die for the revolution. You've got to live for it. And the French say the best revenge is living well. I agree with them. Start voting with your dollar. Start voting with your mouth. Start resisting the system and promoting what's free and independent. And if you just do that, we'll have a better world. Well, that's it for this edition. Great job, crew.